now's the time when things are shifting. There's going to be a new world order out there, and we've got to lead it.
The following program is brought to you by friends and partners of End Time Headlines.
Good evening, everyone. This is End Time Headlines, and we welcome you to tonight's prophetic viewpoint. It is September 28th, 2022. It is Wednesday night, and we've got some breaking news in regards to Russia and Ukraine and the entire crisis that's going on over there in Europe. This is breaking news. U.S. Embassy is warning Americans to leave Russia immediately. The U.S. Embassy in Moscow issued a security alert overnight that urged U.S. citizens to leave Russia immediately while there is still options for departing the country. According to the report, the alert comes in the wake of Russian President Vladimir Putin's order for partial mobilization of Russian men to fight in his war in Ukraine. Quote, Russia may refuse to acknowledge Russia may refuse to acknowledge dual nationals' U.S. citizenship, deny their access to U.S. consular assistance, and prevent their departure from Russia, and conscript dual nationals for military service. This is according to the alert. The alert went on to say, quote, Russian authorities have arrested U.S. citizens who have participated in demonstrations. The embassy has consistently warned Americans not to travel to Russia and to depart the country immediately if they're present. The report went on to say that the embassy alert urged U.S. citizens to avoid all political or social protests and do not photograph security personnel at these events, noting that the right to peaceful assembly and freedom of expression are not guaranteed in Russia. Now, guys, look, we came on tonight because we typically do not broadcast on Wednesday nights, but the events that are happening right now involving Russia, and it now has pulled America in this, and Ukraine, and the situation there is becoming more and more volatile. Now, this comes on the heels of also another report that a U.S. Coastal Guard ship on routine patrol in the Bering Sea came across a guided missile cruiser from China. Now, this is off the coast of Alaska. However, it turned out the cruiser was not alone, as it sailed about 86 miles north of Alaska's Keskwa Island on September 19th. The patrol boat, known as a cutter called Kimball, later discovered there were two other Chinese naval ships as well as four Russian naval vessels, including a destroyer, all in single formation. So isn't it interesting that you have Russia and China together? Again, this naval ships and even a destroyer all spotted off the coast of Alaska. Now, people will say, well, this happens all the time. This is normal. This is routine. But again, in light of what's going on right now and the fact that there is a Russian destroyer in the mix, this, at least to me, is a little bit concerning. Now, again, this also comes on the heels of the recent mysterious, and I quote, mysterious underwater explosions that were detected in the precise areas of the sea where the Nord Stream pipeline system is now leaking. In fact, the explosions were so large, they actually registered on the Richter scale. Now, we reported on this yesterday when this was a developing story, and we want to give you more information about this. All right, so we're being told that these pipelines were damaged roughly around 70 to 90 meters below sea level. So an individual would have to go pretty deep to sabotage this pipeline. And again, the reports are out there. There was explosions heard. So one agency came out and said that this was absolutely a work of sabotage. We're going to give you a video by Tucker Carlson in a minute that I thought was very interesting, and it gives you a little bit more insight into what we're talking about tonight than what we're even discussing here. So hang on for a minute. We're going to give you that video. Let me read on here. It's extremely unlikely that the pipelines ruptured by accident. Let me say that again. It is extremely unlikely that these pipelines ruptured by accident. Quote, the steel pipe itself has a wall of 1.6 inches and is coated with steel reinforced concrete up to 11 centimeters thick. Each section of the pipe weighs 11 tons, which goes to 24 to 25 tons after the concrete is then applied. Again, this was not an accident. So I don't care what the mainstream media or the narrative says that this was a convenient accident. No, I don't buy that for 1 minute. It's also being reported that the explosions were so loud they were heard in areas where gas is now leaking out of the pipelines. Quote, explosions were heard near the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipes where gas is now leaking into the Baltic from 3 holes. And when we show you this clip from Tucker Carlson, you're going to see the environmental impact and the danger of this. While chronic safety concerns have led to a 5-mile exclusion zone being imposed around the affected area. Let me say that again. Chronic safety concerns have led to a 5-mile exclusion zone being imposed around the affected area. The Swedish National Seismic Network picked up on the explosion, and it was even registered as a 1.9 on the Richter scale. And the other explosion registered as a 2.3 on the Richter scale. Let me give you that quote. 2 powerful underwater explosions were detected in the same area of the sea as the Nord Stream gas leaks, according to the Swedish National Seismic Network. The monitoring network said the first explosion occurred on Monday morning at 2:03 a.m. Swedish time with a magnitude of 1.9 on the Richter scale, followed by a second explosion at 7:04 p.m. on the same day with a magnitude of 2.3. The largest leak is reportedly spreading bubbles of 3,280 feet in diameter. This is huge. Quote, it comes after shocking footage released earlier today by the Danish military from a flyover of the affected region showed huge swaths of the sea near the Danish island of Bornholm churning at the gas bubble to the surface. A military statement claimed that the largest leak is spreading bubbles a good 3,280 feet in diameter. The smallest is creating a circle about 656 feet in diameter, while the head of Denmark's energy agency said it could take up to a week for gas to stop draining into the sea. Great. So now we've got another environmental crisis like we did with the BP oil refinery explosion. Remember that? Germany, listen to this. Here's some more information on this. German officials came out immediately and said, quote, this was a deliberate act of sabotage. Now, we don't know who did it. Consequently, was it Russia? Was it Ukraine? Was it America? Is it a false flag? Yes, I said it. Germany is reportedly far less hesitant, however, with officials believing sabotage is virtually the only plausible cause for the leaks. Quote, we cannot imagine a scenario that isn't, hold on. stop. Let me say that again. Quote, we cannot imagine a scenario that is not a targeted attack. Everything speaks against a, quote, coincidence. Again, this was from a government official reportedly telling the German newspaper this very thing. Now, this incident, according to Michael Snyder in his report, said that, quote, this interestingly took place just one day after thousands of German protesters took to the streets and demanded the opening of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Let me say that again. This disaster, this quote unquote accident, took place 24 hours after thousands of German protesters took to the streets and demanded the opening of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Let me give you that report. Quote, thousands of protesters took to the streets in the northeastern German seaside town of Lamine on Sunday. And if I slaughtered that, I ask that you forgive me, urging officials to put into service the halted Nord Stream 2 pipeline project that was designed to transport fuel from Russia to Germany. Now, remember, here's another interesting tidbit. Russia had already warned, and I'm not saying that they're the fault to this, but I'm just throwing this out there. Russia has already warned and did warn that they threatened that Europe would freeze this winter, that they could shut off energy to Europe.
Are emerging in the EU's critical efforts to target Vladimir Putin's war chest. EU energy ministers held an emergency meeting today to discuss a proposal to cap how much they pay for Russian gas. No agreement reached, and plenty of disagreement. The tense negotiations coming just days after Putin himself warned that he would cut off the EU completely if it went ahead with a price cap. No gas, no oil, no cold. Nothing, he said, over a long winter. With the coldest months fast approaching, that warning appeared to rattle some of the EU nations that rely heavily on Russian energy, among them Hungary, Slovakia, and Austria. Ministers representing those countries expressed fears that their countries would be plunged into a deep recession. We've already seen protests building over inflation across Europe, and in particular, skyrocketing energy costs. The public outrage bubbling in a way we haven't seen over the 6 months of Putin's war. The head of NATO today acknowledged the alliance will face one of its biggest challenges yet.
In the coming months, our unity and solidarity will be tested. With pressure on energy supplies and the soaring cost of living caused by Russia's war. But the price we pay is measured in money, while the price the Ukrainians are paying is measured in lives, lost lives every day.
Germany had stalled the launch of the ambitious energy project for months before putting it on the back burner in the wake of Russia's military operation in Ukraine, which is now in its 8th month. We also know that the Prime Minister of Denmark also believes that this was a deliberate act of sabotage. Quote, Danish Prime Minister went out and said her government believes that the leaks were caused by a, quote, deliberate actions, adding that the gas supply pipeline will be out of action for around a week at least. She went on to say that, quote, it is now the clear assessment by authorities that these are deliberate actions. It was not an accident. There is no information yet to indicate who may be behind these actions or be behind these actions. Now, of course, the Ukrainians are blaming the Russians. I'm sure the Russians will blame the Ukrainians or the West. But again, this is chilling. This is alarming. Now, there are also reports indicating that the CIA recently warned Germany about a potential attack on these very pipelines. According to a German magazine, It stated that the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency recently warned Berlin about the increasing signs of a possible planned attack on the Nord Stream pipeline system. Oh, just like there was floods of consistent warnings that came in way before September 11, 2001 about the potential and the dangers of terrorists taking aircrafts and flying them into tall structures in America. And our entire government was warned about this. The agencies were warned about this, yet somehow they were still able to carry out these attacks on U.S. soil. But here we go. Again, I'm just saying it's interesting. Even the CIA warned Germany about this potential very thing happening. A Polish member of the European Parliament joins Denmark and German officials, and also echoing the statements and echoing the assessment that this was a deliberate act of sabotage. Now, of course, again, I want to give you this video from Tucker Carlson, who's going to put the icing on the cake to this, and then we'll come back right after this. So watch this. Check this out.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, you hate to start a Tuesday evening on a grim note, but one of the environmental catastrophes, one of the great environmental catastrophes of our time, is unfolding tonight off the coast of Denmark. The Nord Stream pipelines, which are enormous Russian-owned conduits that carry natural gas from Russia to Western Europe, have been breached. As we speak, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 are pouring millions of cubic meters of natural gas into the Baltic Sea. Pictures from the air, which you can now see on your screen, show a toxic bubble field more than half a mile wide. You can only guess at how many marine mammals are being killed right now, countless. But the lasting damage may be to the atmosphere. Natural gas is comprised of up to 90% methane. Methane, as Joe Biden has often told you, is the key driver of global warming, which is, of course, an existential threat to humanity and the planet. So if you're worried about climate change, what just happened to the Nord Stream pipelines is as close to the apocalypse as we have ever come. So the question is, how did this happen? And it turns out it was not an accident. At the very same time that leaks in these pipelines were detected, Swedish officials recorded 2 powerful undersea explosions, each one of which was equivalent to hundreds of pounds of TNT. Nothing in nature can account for that. Almost immediately, the pipelines began leaking in 3 separate places. So there's only one explanation for what happened. This was an act of industrial terrorism. That was very obvious to the Prime Minister of Poland, and he wasted no time in saying so. Watch.
Today, we are also dealing with an act of sabotage. We do not know the details of what happened yet, but we can clearly see that it is an act of sabotage, an act that probably marks the next stage in the escalation of the situation we are dealing with in Ukraine.
We can clearly see, he said, this was an act of sabotage, an act of terrorism. Well, yes, we can see that. So the question is who did it, and of course the prime suspect is obvious. It would be the same man who caused domestic inflation here in the U.S. and stole the 2016 election from Hillary Clinton. That'd be Vladimir V. Putin. The Washington Post got right to it. Putin, they declared, is now weaponizing the Nord Stream pipelines. According to the Canadian ambassador to the UN, Vladimir Putin has decided to use, quote, pollution as an act of war. Progressive Twitter strongly endorsed this conclusion. Putin did it. And that makes sense until you thought about it for just a moment. Vladimir Putin may be evil. They tell us that he is evil. But is he stupid? Probably isn't stupid. And yet, and here's the strange part, if you are Vladimir Putin, you would have to be a suicidal moron to blow up your own energy pipelines. That's the one thing you would never do. Natural gas pipelines are the main source of your power and your wealth, and most critically, your leverage over other countries. Europe needs your energy, now more than ever with winter approaching. If you can't deliver that energy, then countries like Germany have no need to pay attention to what you want. You're in the middle of a war, an all-hands-on-deck war, so you need all the leverage you can get. Under these circumstances, there is no chance you would blow up Nord Stream 1 or 2. Not now, obviously. In fact, it's so obvious that even our famously dim Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, seemed to acknowledge it. Sabotaging Nord Stream, he said today, is, quote, clearly in no one's interest. Right, but really only half right. It is true that blowing up Nord Stream does not help Vladimir Putin. He would not do that. Why would he? But that doesn't mean that other countries wouldn't consider doing it. They would consider it, and we know they have considered it because at least one of them has said so in public. In early February, less than 3 weeks before the war in Ukraine began, Joe Biden suggested on camera that he might take out these pipelines. Watch.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Now I want to conclude with this. This all comes consequently shortly after European officials just gathered for a ceremony to, quote, mark the opening of the new Baltic pipe. Quote, leaders from Poland, Norway, and Denmark have attended a ceremony to mark the opening of the new Baltic pipe, a key stage in the drive to wean Poland and Europe off Russian gas. The pipeline will transport natural gas from the Norwegian shelf via Denmark and through the Baltic Sea to Poland. It is the centerpiece of a Polish strategy to diversify away from Russia that began years before Moscow's February invasion of Ukraine triggered a global energy crisis. The flows from Norway, along with supplies via liquefied gas terminals, are central to Poland's plan. The country was cut off from Russian gas supplies back in April, allegedly for refusing to pay in rubles. So, this, again, what are we talking about today? The conclusion is this, friends. Things are getting very interesting with the entire scenario that's unfolding with Russia, with Ukraine, and with the West, and with NATO, and with everyone that's involved in this. The war drums are pounding louder and louder and louder, and we see now that the U.S. Embassy in Russia has urged Americans to leave immediately. We've got Chinese and Russian vessels, including warships, off the coast of Alaska. We've got what now we can come to the conclusion that is a direct, blatant act of sabotage on a major gas pipeline that is going to affect not just the West, but also Europe, and is also an environmental disaster in the making as well. So again, these are trying times, these are perilous times, and this is why we've got to stay prayed up. This is why we got to stay in the Word. This is why we have to stay close to the Lord in these last days, because we know that it's going to get darker, it's going to get crazier out there, and we don't know what's coming in the days ahead. So we have to be on guard, be watchmen, and be watching, and be ready for the days ahead. Again, endtimeheadlines.org, endtimeheadlines.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our main website. Don't forget to download our free app that is available on Apple and Android. Again, hit that push notification and be notified of every headline and every podcast when it is made available after you download the free app. If this ministry is a continual source of information, revelation, equipping, encouraging on a week-to-week basis, we want to encourage you to support our ministry with a gift of any amount. Listen, you pray about it, whatever the Lord leads you. We don't manipulate people. We just ask if it's a blessing to you and your family. we want to give you the opportunity to sow into this ministry. You can do it two different ways. You can give electronically through the app, or you can do it through check or money order at the main website. Check or money order by making it out to End Time Headlines, P.O. Box 1391. That's Monroe, Georgia 30655. So listen, friend, I'm going to leave you with, as always, Luke 21:28. Jesus said, when you begin to see all these things coming to pass, look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption is drawing near. God bless you guys. We're going to sign off for today. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to the End Time Headlines podcast. We pray that you've been blessed and equipped by today's message. For more information about how you can help partner with our ministry, please visit endtimeheadlines.org.